I sent out an email about three-quarters of an hour ago, just saying that um, uh, there were um, uh, three presentations I know of at the AGU about SAI, kind of supportive of it. There was actually a fourth I saw about effect of SAI on Indian monsoons, I think it was, which seemed to be not definitively either pro or anti-SAI. But we had my own presentation, which was about weather extremes, how the Arctic warming is increasing the weather extremes, at least in the northern hemisphere, possibly with repercussions in the southern hemisphere as well. But I didn't talk about that. And then there's a paper that I've just seen from Doug McMartin. His was an oral, not an oral presentation like mine, but a poster presentation. So he's got a poster, and he sent me the copy of the poster. I don't know if I should distribute it because it's kind of in confidence, I think, because he's about to publish something on it. Anyhow, he summarized it by saying this shows that SAI can save the AMOC from collapse. And there's been some worry that the AMOC could collapse within a decade or two. I think the sort of median estimate is a bit longer, but there's a significant chance of it happening within a decade or two. So that's considered a major hazard because the AMOC governs the distribution of ocean water around the planet, apart from the Arctic and the Antarctic. Well, perhaps the Antarctic, well, it's a landmass, so that's not applicable. But everywhere else is affected by the AMOC. It's a global circulation. If that's disrupted, it has an effect on climates all over the place. A major, and you can get abrupt climate change. We know about this because it's happened in the past when the AMOC has collapsed. And one reason for the collapse is actually the collapse of the Greenland ice sheet. So if that collapses, the glaciers cascade, they're blocks of ice, an avalanche into the ocean. The sign of that having happened in the past is that you get ice rafted debris deposited. It's called IRD, ice rafted debris, deposited in off France, so e.g. Bay of Biscay, from the icebergs that travel right across. And that can allow the Arctic to refreeze over. But if the warming's already too much, then the Arctic stays unfrozen, and you get some other kind of effect. So this is a kind of we don't know which way it's going. If it goes one way, the world could be plunged into an ice age, as happened in the past, or if it goes the other way, we could be into hothouse Earth. So there's quite a lot of discussion to be made about the AMOC, which hasn't really been discussed very openly in the climate community. I don't propose to discuss it any further now. So his thing is on the AMOC, and then there are two other tipping points. One is the Greenland ice sheet, as I've just mentioned. That could get us to a state of disintegration when glaciers cascade down into the ocean and cause bigger tsunamis and raise the sea level. And the fourth tipping point is the methane from permafrost. If you get a big outburst of that, for example, after an earthquake, you could get a destabilizing of a huge volume of the methane hydrate, or also known as clathrate, and that a pulse of that, big pulse of that, at a megaton level could lead us to a hothouse through its warming effect. So those are the four, and then there are some other effects, good things from refreezing the Arctic. One is restoring the Arctic ecosystem and the life forms which flourish or were flourishing there. And then there's restoring the way of life of the Sami and other Arctic peoples who are dependent on fishing, hunting seals, and having reindeer on snow. So that's another reason. And the third reason I listed was the Arctic warming is having an effect on global warming. It's contributing to global warming through a considerable loss of albedo. The combination of retreat of sea ice at the poles was at a record last year, and we had record global warming and heat extremes. And the Ceres satellite said that the albedo was exceptionally low. Actually, they put it the other way around on the graph. The absorption of solar radiation was exceptionally high. So we know that there was an anomaly last year. It doesn't seem to be so bad this year from the Ceres satellite, and nobody's really explained why it should have gone down again. But then things have happened to El Nino, the ENSO circulation, which has which is kind of quasi-random event, and a fiercer El Niña phase could be reducing temperatures generally this year, or could have this year. It's still going to be a record hot year, but it's not as not the top record. I'm told something like the third hottest year ever. I don't know if anybody else has seen the figure for that. So that's the gist of the climate crisis as I see it. It's an absolute horror of a crisis, and it justifies SAI as soon as possible. And I suggest that we've done enough testing through observations of volcanoes to know that SAI is going to work. We now need to concentrate on how best to ramp up the deployment And Doug McMartin has shown that we could start at 50 degrees or 60 degrees north for a maximum effect as a realistic approach to refreezing the Arctic. He would start with deployment at that 50 or 60 degrees north, and he would also do it at the south poles to keep the symmetry as it is now. I would suggest that it's gone asymmetric. The northern hemisphere's heating more than the southern hemisphere, and so I would be cooling the Arctic as a priority over the Antarctic. But this is where we need we need real thorough investigation with all the heat flows and things considered, atmospheric circulation and everything, and nobody's doing it.
But John, I sent you an email last week. There's a fellow named Herb something, not Herb Simmons, of course, but he's in the London area and he's doing a PhD. He's written several papers. I'll resend that email, but he seems like he might be an ally. I think he's connected with Operati Arctis. I might be confusing him with another fellow, but he's doing modeling of the Arctic. So he's already doing this as far as I can tell from what I read. Did you recall seeing that email? If not, I'll resend it.
Um, I well, send it in case. I think I don't remember seeing it, but I'm quite a long way behind on all my emails. In fact,
I'll resend it to you.
I think one of the most another kind of promising development is from Wouter van Dieren, who sent a message about he says he's got contacts in various places, including military and industry, addressing the kind of problems that we're addressing as well. I'm very disappointed that Sir David King hasn't come on board with to address our problems and help us, but he hasn't as yet. He's remained silent for several weeks of my sending him messages and asking him to respond. So if any of you have can contact him, independent of me, perhaps you could seek his opinion on what we're doing and find out what he's doing. At the last count, he was on a marine cloud brightening project. Incidentally, marine cloud brightening, it turns out it's not the brightening of the clouds that has the big effect. It's the increase in cloud cover that you get. So if you put up these cloud condensation nuclei, you can start a cloud, so you get more clouds that way, but you can also lengthen the life of the clouds. Stephen Sultan never mentioned this. He was talking about getting the droplet size exactly right to brighten the clouds. But perhaps it's not so critical. The droplet size may not be so critical if you're just wanting to start clouds going, and if you want to prolong their life. Of course, there's a danger that what you do is to seed the clouds and then they just rain down and you lose their reflective capacity. But that's an interesting thing. And it seems that the reduction in SO2 aerosols has had an effect on reducing cloud cover. Now, when the global temperature goes up, you expect there to be the humidity goes up, you expect there to be more clouds, and that would shade things and act as a negative feedback, a dampener of the effect of global warming. You expect that. You expect more hurricanes and tropical storms. They're more intense, and they have a huge benefit on cooling, both through reflecting sunshine and increasing the amount of infrared radiated into space. But that doesn't seem to have been happening. It seems that the total effect seems to be the net effect seems to be reversed. That the cloud cover is reducing. One should be able to tell exactly how much that is going, but I've seen no figures on that or graphs. There's a slide produced by Leon Simmons. That's Simons, a lot like Herb, spelt like Herb's surname. I don't know how he pronounces it either. But anyhow, this man works for Hansen, and he's producing graphs of showing how the radiative, the shortwave absorption has been going up, and the long wave emissions have been going up too, and the distance between them has been increasing, and that has to be due to either clouds or ice. So we don't know how much this is an effect of losing cloud cover as SO2 is reduced, and ships, particularly ships, issuing SO2 over the oceans could be a major thing, but also this record retreat of sea ice could be a major contributor. But that's a thing that needs to be resolved, but hasn't been. I think we just have to take a precautionary principle and assume it could be one or the other, so we've got to work on both. Both try to increase the ice cover, snow and ice cover, and increase cloud cover. And that's where Brian von Hertzen has a brilliant presentation just a day or two ago on how he proposes to do this by promoting phytoplankton and various other organisms which will absorb CO2, give off DMS or other kind of sulfide compounds, which then have effect of brightening clouds. And you can do the same thing with the not the iron salt aerosol. I'm not sure whether that does it, but putting iron into the ocean iron fertilization, which Ross George has promoted, would be a very good way of increasing DMS, as he has been pointing out for over a decade now.
And on that note, a week ago, a person reached out to me. I think he's the executive director of some group down in Atlanta doing exactly that, what Alex Carlin and Russ George are doing. He's got an NGO, and he's connected with some other people. I've forgotten his. I just friended him this morning on LinkedIn, if that's the right word. I don't think it's
mm,
called friend in there, but there's another person who could be an ally. I put in the chat this fellow Matthew Henry, who's doing
mm,
postdoc research, and he's connected with just about everybody that I know at Operatio Arctis.
mm,
So just think in terms of how to expand our little network to actually get some testing done. I'm thinking in terms of actual testing that we can take to a funder or a politician or somebody. So far, we've got really no testing results uh, of any of these things that we're talking about. But I think
mm.
it's important.
Well, Greg has proposed a testing in the um, for the Antarctic, um, which he talked about at our last meeting, and I can see the point, that point, and there's another possibility which Brian and I dreamt up, which is to do with putting filling oil tanks in airplanes. Apparently, you can have several tanks of slightly different mixtures of fuel in your aircraft tanks, and then you fly them over the pole. You alternate the tanks. Some have got more sulfur in them than the other, and you see whether that uh, affects contrails, which you might be able to observe from a satellite. So that's a proposal that you could do some testing at very cheaply. Um, Basically, we just need to get an agreement from the air authorities to do it. Um, uh,
But I think, John, to do
yeah.
that, we're going to have the modeling. And this fellow, Matthew Henry, and this other fellow that reached out to me,
Mm,
perhaps could do the modeling that could show that if you did it evenly in the northern and southern poles, that it would result in whatever the result is in a
mm,
convincing way, hopefully to get the military or whoever has the air power
mm,
um, to actually agree to do a test.
mm,
I think you've got to have some sort of evidence before they'll say, yeah, we'll support that. You know what I'm saying?
mm.
So anyway, I'm suggesting reaching out to this. He's in Exeter. Matthew Henry is in Exeter. And I think that's probably pretty close to you, isn't it, Exeter?
Not too far. It's about as far from here as London is. So Bath is kind of midway, roughly speaking.
Yeah, so we could reach out to him and arrange for a meeting someplace or a Zoom or whatever you think would be appropriate.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Mostly the Exeter people are um, very much kind of IPCC oriented, and um,
But he's
Greg,
studying the Arctic SRM. He's actually
yeah.
studying SRM in the
Well,
Arctic.
that's brilliant.
Sorry, I left that important piece out. He's written several papers. I haven't looked up the papers, but we could spend some time looking at his papers and finding
Yeah.
out where.
Well, let's do that. Now, what about this fellow from Operatio Arctic?
Well, so
There's somebody in London, you thought?
Herb, not Herb, but what I say his name was. I'm looking at Herb's message here. Matthew Henry. He's connected with them on LinkedIn. He's
Mm.
connected to Anton and Lena and Victor and Ellen and I'm leaving somebody else out, but so he's connected with all of them. So
Oh,
that
sorry, he's the man in Exeter, is he? Or
so,
you're talking about somebody else?
so that's Matthew. His name is Matthew Henry. He's in
Yeah.
Exeter, but he's connected to all of the Finns.
Mm. And who's the man in Exeter?
That's Matthew Henry.
Oh, so we're talking about the same man.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Matthew
Okay.
Henry is doing computer modeling of SRM and other research. I have no idea. And written several
But
papers of the Arctic.
but he's connected, well connected, you're saying. So if we could get him and we could get uh, Wouter van Leeren as well with his connections, uh, uh, persuade Sir David to join in with his diplomacy because that's where he's extremely strong. We've got to have a pro SRM movement to counter this insidious movement against anti SRM that's having a growing success persuading all and sundry that SRM is dangerous, which of course
Yeah.
it isn't.
So, John, I just got a message. We have 5 minutes left. Do we want to go beyond five, or shall we plan to do some homework and reach out to Matthew and Arctic, Apparati Arctic?
Yeah, I
And
think that's a very positive development. There's something else I wanted to discuss, and that was the possibility of this having a cryosphere COP.
yeah, right.
Um,
This might be a way to convince people to do that. If we could get
yeah,
Matthew Henry to give us some anchor or whatever you want to call it,
mm,
gravitas, that here's we have some work and seed information or whatever the right word is.
mm.
Um,
One of the reasons for thinking about this or working towards a climate COP is that we would be forced to do some homework, trying to identify all the commercial interests that there might be in the cryosphere, preserving the cryosphere. The thing was kind of put in my mind by the Swiss, who of course have their ski industry at stake, and they're very worried about all their glaciers retreating, not just retreating fast, but retreating faster. And some of them have practically disappeared, so they've stopped measuring the ice mass loss from them because there's so little ice left to lose. Okay, so I think it's worth us restarting again in a second to pursue this, if that's everybody is agreeable to that.
okay, it's going to shut down in a couple of minutes. So I just wanted to say that, Dennis's idea was to have two agendas, one for testing and one for the cryosphere COP. That would be the political side. I'm feeling that to have a test, you actually, in either case, you need to have some modeling, like Doug McMartin apparently has done, and maybe just a little bit more extensive, possibly. I don't know. I don't know what Doug's modeling has shown per se, but how to leverage that to convince these people to support us is. I think Dennis had a good idea. We should work on that. Shall we shut down now and just start up again?
Well, just one thought before we're actually stopped, and that is it's, the one thing that would actually save the planet is if Trump decided to deploy SAI. So if there's any way of persuading him, that would be good. That would be good.
Well, frankly, between you and me, I don't think we have any say with Trump. I think he's got to come up with the idea himself.
Well, I don't know. We might know have some friends who are, strong Trump supporters who might help us.
Well, you're an optimist, John, but I'll go with you. I'll support you.
I I had some dealings with Trump years ago, so I don't know if he remembers, but I could try that.
Oh, Herb,
You know,
that would be brilliant.
old
Yeah.
buddies.
Anyhow, you've probably read my argument, have you?
Oh yes, yeah. I mean, Trump is the wild card because he's so unpredictable, and people like Newt Gingrich, if you know Newt Gingrich, John, a
Mm,
very influential American politician. He has supported geoengineering in the past, and some of the right-wing think tanks have. So there's
mm,
certainly an opportunity, and some of the Republican Congress members have. So
mm.
it is conceivable. It's certainly not likely, but it's certainly worth pursuing.
Yeah. Let's put out feelers, but we need to be cautious because they could turn and round and do the opposite.
Right.
Well, here for those of us in the United States, we have to be extra cautious since he's taken office with the primary goal of retribution and revenge. So we don't want to get on his wrong side.
Yeah.
It's not even it's
You
not
don't want to
funny.
tell him, you don't want to let him figure out our deception of how whatever our approach is, because he may just turn against us, obviously, like you said. All right, well, let's,
And
Well,
and if
yeah,
we're successful, we might lose all support on the left. So it's a very risky maneuver and would have to be done fairly secretly.
very,
mm,
yeah. Okay,
okay,
John, did you get the chat or let me see if I can capture the chat
yeah.
before we lose this. Oh, I got things in the way here. I think
I've got
John,
the
we don't
chat.
have
I've
any
got the chat so far. Yeah.
you got
John,
it.
we don't have any support from the left right now anyway. There's nothing left for us to lose.
That's right.
Seriously.
Well,
Pretty
I mean,
dismal.
that's
seriously.
more or less that's more or less true, isn't it?
I mean,
The
all my
left.
climate colleagues, seriously, all my climate colleagues who are on the left, they hardly talk to me anymore, seriously. So there's not much to lose.
Like Joni Mitchell. No, who is it? Peter, Paul, and Mary. Freedom's not free, but only somehow. You know the words to that song? Freedom's nothing left to lose.
Oh, I know what you mean, but you don't want me to sing it.
So I'm trying to open an email here so I can save the chat. I think we're going to lose it for some reason. I'm not being very
I, I've
coordinated.
I've got the chat.
You got it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
At least so far. I see a long thing from Jonathan. I haven't read it yet, but yeah.
Yeah, I ran into a new counter argument to what we're proposing, and that is that uh, you guys are doing such a great job, and you all sound so smart. So I'm not going to change my lifestyle behavior, nor am I going to donate to you because I need my money for my own lifestyle of flying around the world and eating meat. So it's Herb mentioned it might be just sort of a weird moral hazard that otherwise rational people see people who are smart working on something and then make the conclusion that we're going to solve it just fine, so they don't help. And the other thing I came up with is the bystander effect, which is a well-known effect if you
Off in the first half, uh, if it's going to be a full 40 minutes now, was discussing uh, the a kind of alternative ways forward, advocacy. Who can we get to listen to us? Who are our potential allies? And I was suggesting that Wouter von der Leyen van Leyen is somebody we should try and liaise with. He's got a large number of contacts we could use. And Jonathan was just telling us about some views that people have. Perhaps, for example, that you could, if you knew people were working on something, you might just kind of relax and let let them get on with it, not knowing that they are really like us, we're really struggling to, without funding. And um, now, one thing that Doug suggested was to utilize um, a female voice for my presentation, and we thought of Aria, and I think that's rather good idea to have a female voice exposing the kind of things that we're doing, because it tends to be men who produce the kind of grim side of things, and so the women who tend to think about all the good that could come out of this for our children and grandchildren, it counts perhaps a little bit more. And also, it's maybe more pleasant to listen to a female voice. I don't know.
What brought that up for the others on email on Facebook? I get all these ads to buy their product, and the other day I noticed that it was the same ad in it repeating, but it went from a man's voice to a faster paced, higher pitched female voice, and it just occurred to me that it was a total different. It gave me a totally different perception of this product. So I think we need to try different ways of presenting the message. John has done a very, very brief 5-minute video, which I think could be done probably in 3 minutes with somebody who talks a little faster and maybe a little higher voice, and it might that strategy might get us some attention. I don't know. It's worth experiment. We should talk to Aria about that. She probably has some.
Yeah, that would be brilliant. Okay, now what about industries? There must be some industries that are interested in cooling the planet, and a whole lot of industries who would suffer from a sea level rise. And of course, there's also the global south, who are already suffering badly from climate change. And they seem to get neglected by the IPCC and that lot. They don't talk about the suffering that's already going on as a result of climate change.
Tom Burrow is really down on doing anything. He just feels the islands are lost. I don't know if you saw those emails he wrote last week.
Who's this?
Tom Garreau.
Yeah.
He actually has to leave the group because he's just convinced all the islands are going kaput. Although he's out there trying to regrow coral, so he's doing something, but he's very pessimistic.
Mm.
But yeah, I just don't know that getting the small islands to support us. I don't think they have anything to gain because they're going underwater anyway, no matter what we do.
I think if we manage to refreeze the Arctic and halt the deterioration in the Antarctic, and then produce some global cooling, we could turn things around in about 10 years. At least point things the other direction within 10 years.
Well, we had a Pacific task force of our advocacy committee, and people like Rafe and Robert Tulip and myself and Dennis and a few others were on it, and there were a few initiatives that were made to various Pacific Island ambassadors and so forth, and we got nowhere. That's not to say that might not be a different result trying again, but it certainly wasn't at least initially an easy nut to crack. And I just want to make the comment, and John Cole knows this, of course, that John Cole and Aria have been leading our communication and media team for HPAC, and Aria recorded for our upgraded website that we hope will go live soon, a video introduction. But I know she's pretty much swamped with other work now. So, certainly you can reach out to her. But my guess is that she's probably not in a position to help. But if you have come up with a script or something, or you said you already have one, it's certainly worth sharing it with her.
I want to note that Jonathan has his hand up, but I want to ask Herb a question on what you said. You said you didn't get anywhere with the small island delegations. Just say a little bit more on that. Was it because they feel they're doomed, or were white guys up north, or some other
I don't
reason?
even think, I mean, it wasn't like we had some full-fledged major campaign, but I think, and I'm really speaking more from Robert Tulip, but I know he had what he thought was a pretty good contact with the ambassador of one of the Pacific Island states to Australia, I believe, and wrote him or called him or whatever, and couldn't even get a response. Coincidentally, one of my neighbors used to be the chief judge. He's an American, but he's used to be the chief judge in the Supreme Court of the Federation of Micronesia. So he tried to set up a meeting with in fact, he did set up a meeting for he and I to have lunch with the ambassador to Micronesia in the spring, and the ambassador canceled at the last minute, and we couldn't get him to reschedule it. So, you know, I don't know what to make of it. It's not saying that means don't try to get anywhere, but that's all. That's all I'm saying is that our initial efforts didn't get very far, and I think it really needs to be done in some kind of systematic basis where you do this sort of research on the individual country, you see what what their public positions are. You do it as if you're, trying to lobby, like a good lobbyist, which obviously takes a lot of time and effort to be successful. And that's something that none of us, we don't have the resources to do what's needed. So all we can do is these little forays and hope that one of them strikes with a certain amount of success.
So I'm gonna turn it over to Jonathan in a second, but I just want to comment. I think what you just said is prompting me to think each one of us should take on one project. If we had a dozen people or 2 dozen people, each focusing on Tuvalu and the Sami and the Inuit and you name it, specifics, and finding the individual like uh, Hans Vanderloo has made a connection with somebody in the Inuit Council. If we had one individual looking at each of those, we could have put together that sort of a campaign. Let's talk about that later. Jonathan, go ahead. You had your hand up.
Oh, thanks. I think that the island nations are under a very perverse incentive right now. I do not think we will be able to get any of them on board. And unfortunately, I think that this same perverse incentive might be leaking into some of the northern groups as well, the Arctic groups and such. And the way I would describe the perverse incentive is what COP is being successful at is getting together a huge amount of money to basically line the pockets of politicians and landowners in the regions that are being most destroyed by rising sea levels and other climate effects. So if you think about the psyche of somebody who lives on an island and they have a house and a small business, a restaurant, whatever, and the international community is thinking about writing them a check for $1 million to relocate to some nearby mainland, they are looking at an exit plan, which becomes a perverse incentive for them to support anything except that. In other words, if you throw money at this problem and give it to the individuals that are under the gun for losing their property, you create an incentive for them to be quiet and cooperate. You see what I mean? In other words, nobody's really being harmed if everybody's being given $1 million. And this will work until the destruction of, let's say, the rising sea level in Miami or something becomes so vast that you just can't pay off the people anymore. When there's 1 million people losing their homes, all in one flood event, there's just not enough money in any budget to do that. So we may be seeing a period where the people that we would think are the most motivated to want us to solve their problem through solar engineering are actually just getting in line for their payoff.
Yeah. Yeah, their incentive is to maintain the status quo, do as they're told, so that they can argue for more money. Yeah, I see that. Yeah, you're almost certainly correct on that, I'm afraid. But when I went to a COP a few years ago, went to the Diwali stand. They had a stand, and I said, "Do you realize that the Arctic meltdown is going to produce meters of sea level rise?" And they had no idea. They had just no idea that there was this danger from the Arctic. So there's a tremendous amount of ignorance, and all these people who are anti-SRM are absolutely ignorant of what's actually going on, or I mean, if they do, they're being extremely perverse. But they really don't think that climate change is an existential threat. They will only say that if they think it's going to promote more emissions reduction. Very interesting listening to the talk from Chris, I think it's Chris Wright, the Energy Secretary. Does that name ring a bell for anybody? There was a little video.
He's the Trump nominee.
He's a Trump nominee. And he was saying that he had about five or six different things that he said were kind of complete rubbish, falsehoods, and the first thing he said, climate crisis. There's no climate crisis, he said. And then he went on to say weather extremes. No, there's no growth in weather extremes. And then, very significantly, I thought, he quoted the IPCC. The IPCC have not said that there's an increase in weather extremes. So he is exposing that the IPCC is involved in covering up the dangerous climate change, which their policy is producing. They are under mandate. Their mandate is to prevent dangerous climate change. So because their policy is failing in that respect, they're covering up the fact that there's dangerous climate change. At least that's one way of looking at the IPCC, as a kind of covering up the fact that they are failing. And of course, the fossil fuel industry have more or less taken over the running of the IPCC, as we've seen in the recent COPs. And they are just making sure that the emission reduction doesn't actually take place significantly, and they've succeeded hands down. Nobody is shouting this out, but it's very plain that the Energy Institute expects emissions to continue at roughly the same level, at least until 2050. So this idea of net zero is snuffed out by the fossil fuel companies in practice. Of course, they will pay lip service to striving to reduce emissions and all that kind of thing, and agree to aspirations and all that kind of thing. But they know perfectly well it's just not going to happen. And then the other stupid thing is that net zero could be achieved much earlier than 2050 if there was a big growth in their CO2 removal efforts. And this is never pointed out by the scientists, that we could actually achieve net zero long before 2050 if we put our minds into CDR. So that is very strange, isn't it?
It's interesting. I have friends that are trained by Al Gore, and they believe that, just reducing emissions is going to save us. And I'm constantly posting, at least every day, something about the Arctic or SRM alluding to it. And I get people countering me, and I give them things to read, and they pretty much, not that they're trolls, but they kind of shut up and don't bother me anymore. But what I find is that more and more people accept what I post as just a matter of fact. And I have some people. I have a good friend in Boston, Harvard area, who is totally a convert to understanding that we need to refreeze the Arctic. And he and I had kind of different opinions about things, especially the fossil fuels CEOs. He thinks we need to lock them up and put them in jail and just make life miserable for the people that have caused this. And I say, why bother with them? We need to look forward and change. He's come around. We need to address the Arctic. He understands that. So I have hope that more and more people will understand. Not that I'm saying that the average public, our audience, but even with elected officials and people like Bill McKibben is actually writing things now that sort of tend toward his understanding of the predicament we're in. So if we just keep pushing strategically on these important influencers, I think we'll eventually make some headway. And who knows? Maybe it's going to happen this year if, like Herb says, there's 1 million homes go underwater. It's like this guy that shot the healthcare CEO. If people want to cheer, right? Maybe we want to cheer for a big disaster, but I hate to say that. Anyway, somebody want to John?
Well, you still have the. I guess all of you guys see the post I made a few weeks ago about my encounter with Al Gore.
Yeah.
I mean, he's still. I mean, he gave me a look. I mean, he was no more than 12 inches from me, or I was 12 inches from him, and he gave me this scowl, like, who the hell sent this guy? And even though I was a graduate of the climate reality, that's why I was there, and I went through 3 levels of security, so I wasn't some ringer. But just the fact that I would even ask him to consider SRM, like his nostrils were flailing.
Mm.
And he is probably still the most influential climate person on the planet, or one of the 2 or 3. So I mean, it's not to take away anything what you're saying, Doug. But anyway, it's just but you and I have talked many times and continue to do about McKibben, and I think clearly he seems to be getting close. And as I mentioned to you in an email, which I don't think I've said publicly, but I'll mention it now. Coincidentally and remarkably, I happened to be sitting on the plane on the way over to Baku with a local activist from DC that I had not met before who'd been active for decades, and he told me when I started talking about SRM, which he was or at least somewhat negative towards. He said that McKibben had reached out privately to the leading climate activists in the United States, I mean, in the DC area, to ask him his opinion about geoengineering. So I think Bill is getting closer. And the question is, what will it take to push him over? And maybe I always feel that what's needed is you need several people to come out together so you have strength in numbers. Because if he comes out on his own, he'll get attacked by his own crowd, or at least that's probably what's holding him back.
Well, he's a strategist. He's a senator, and he's looking at all the different implications of what he can and cannot do. So I trust he'll eventually come around. He's got to do it his own way. But if we just with McKibben, if I just keep letting him have the latest URL on this, I know he's got to be reading everything all the time. So he's eventually going to come around.
By the way, I've got to get off soon, and part of the reason is I'm actually going to a town hall tonight, a few blocks from where I live, with Jamie Raskin, who I met with a few months ago, as you guys I'm sure know, and Mike McCracken's going to join me. We're going to have dinner first and see if we can collar Jamie either publicly at the meeting or afterwards or before somehow. We may or may not be able to, but that's our assignment for tonight.
No, this is good. We have about 3 or 4 minutes left. Jonathan, you had your hand out real quick, and then maybe wants to wrap up so we can decide what to do next. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, if we consider a little further this idea of a perverse incentive, then even a climate event in the United States that floods 1 million homes in one go, in one weekend, the solution initially would still be money. In other words, as long as people have a windfall of income to offset their personal disaster, the system is still working. This is the whole system of insurance and stuff. So even if the U.S. had to print more money and double the national debt in order to give people money to relocate after natural disasters, we would still be in this perverse incentive where nobody would have a motivation to try anything else until the money runs out. And of course, that's a very strange situation for the United States, who can print as much money as they want. So I don't think we've quite cracked the psychology on when we can get to the next phase and get past the financial incentive to be quiet.
That's very interesting. By the way, I do like your last effort on the PRAG.
Well, John, about 2 minutes to wrap up here.
With the Arctic thing on the top, you could have it the kind of shape of Greenland if you like. Yeah.
We'll have to talk about those. That's great, John. We'll save that for one of the upcoming meetings as to how to present, put a logo. John, we better wrap up here. We're going to run out of time.
Yeah. I'm still thinking of writing a book. I've told Herb, and I kind of started an outline and I never got any further because there was other things to do. But I think perhaps a book would kind of educate people as to what the real situation was. You need to lay it out pretty thoroughly for people to kind of take it in and accept that may be what's actually happening.
You want to schedule a meeting in January, John?
Yeah, I think we should. I think, but what about your idea of getting each of us to undertake at least something between now and then?
I'll work on, I'll address, what's his name, what I said. I forgot his name already.
Matthew Henry.
Matthew Henry. And this other fellow who also is in Atlanta, Georgia. I'll go after both of those. I'll reach out to them on LinkedIn and do some research.
I'll work on some logos and some useful imagery, trying to capture the essence of the group's purpose.
Okay. Herb?
Well, whatever I can help. Just let me know what you'd like me to do.
Follow through with Jamie and
Yes.
Mike. Yeah, that's your immediate assignment.
Yeah, if we could crack Jamie, of course now, yeah, unfortunately they're not in the majority, but nonetheless, yes, okay, that's my immediate
Hey,
assignment.
you know
Okay.
what? The Democrats are going to have a majority. It is so close. Probst keeps undermining his own GOP. What do you call it? Majority. He keeps.
Well, as I said, we may actually be better with the Republicans, as we talked about earlier, but or this is
Yeah,
this is actually
I
likely.
think that's what I want you to do, to investigate whether there is an opportunity through Republicans without being too partisan.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there really is, and I'm going to talk to Mike about that because Mike has infinitely more contacts in the government from his work all those decades than I do, but we're both here in the DC area, so I'll actually talk with Mike about that at dinner in a little while.
That's a good idea. Push it with Jamie as well. Real quick, Jonathan, go ahead.
Yeah, Herb, perhaps you could ask Mr. Reskin, in his experience, when does government money fail to quiet down an issue? In other words, the government uses money in every direction to quiet down every issue, every kind of injustice, every kind of harm, every kind of upset in the citizenry. But in his experience, when does money not quiet down an issue? Because that's where we have to get to with the climate.
Well, I don't know if I'll have the opportunity, but it's an intriguing question, John. Thanks.
So, John, I'm looking at the calendar. I don't know how much time we have, but 2 weeks would be January 1st. Maybe we should shoot for the 8th or so. Herb, you said the 9th is your next HPAC strategy meeting.
Yes.
If
Yes.
we went for the 8th or the 5th, you go every 2 weeks. Is that right? I mean, it's strictly every 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it will probably be meeting weekly in January, but normally it's every 2 weeks.
So, John, you want to go for the 8th or the 15th?
Let's go for the 8th.
Okay, for the 8th. I'll send something out, and I won't forget next time. I'll be done standing.
Oh, that will be the Wednesday, will it?
Wednesday the 8th, yeah.
Wednesday the 8th.
At 3 o'clock my time, which is 8 o'clock here.
Can I just check on my diary?
Evan, does that work for you?
It'd be the same time as this meeting?
Yeah, this was at 3 o'clock. Where are you, Evan? Are you on the West Coast or East Coast?
California, yeah.
So that would be noon.
Yeah, okay. I will, I saw some announcement of a climate reality event or something. I'm going to follow up on what they announced and see if I can
looking at the diary.
Reply something into the
8th of January. Can you just check that?
Okay, so Evan is going to check with some climate reality people. I understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Evan has his project.
And look for a crack.
There you go. So let me tell you, I did a presentation to Bill McKibben's group, and I also did one to the the Al Gore one as well. And they had they didn't want to hear from me anymore.
Yes, you push it in.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
So they had no use for any discussion about the Arctic or SRM. They did not want me to come back.
Well, that's that's the scoop.
Yeah. So anyway, I thought we'd be out of time by now. So, John, any last final words? 8th, okay?
Yep, that's I've checked and it's okay. Yep. Well, thank you, everybody.